when I was a kid, it was very much like career focused. So you would get a qualification and go into a career and or a profession, and that would for life almost, right? And that would be it. And that's what I was encouraged to do. And I think that was just the norm, right, for where I was in school and college and society, and kind of expectations from my parents, both professionals. And like now it's kind of like I really just want her to do what she is passionate about, because I think the world has changed and passion overrides professional qualifications. Because passion, you put your heart and your everything into it, and you wake up and I want to enjoy what she does and be fulfilled. But I also believe that if you love something so much, it doesn't feel like work, and you will create something so much better than if you feel like it's a chore and you have to get up and do something that it's kind of you've either fallen into or forced into at worst. So
you're talking about your daughter now, but are you actually talking about you as well?
Well, yeah, I am, because I think that's a reflection I had like 4 or 5 years ago, right? And so before that, even maybe not, maybe a bit before that, because obviously I bided my time in PwC before I left for a number of personal reasons. But I think certainly in the initial part of my career, it was I this is what I'm going to do, and I was kind of on that train that wouldn't. It was very difficult to stop it, very difficult to jump off it, very difficult to deviate, and that's what the expectation was around me and from me. And then you kind of realize that there's a different way to do it, and I was passionate. I'm obviously supremely passionate about what we do at Flinder and what we do with our clients and how we treat our people and how we develop our team into professionals, and give them both autonomy, entrepreneurial spirit, but also a qualification as a backbone. Because let's be honest, right? I'm absolutely for a professional qualification, but it's what you do with it and how you interact with it. It's how you help businesses and the way in which you do it. Like my time in that era was I wore a suit to work, right? And I just don't believe you need to wear a suit to be your best self. You need to be comfortable in your own skin. You need to be comfortable coming to work, and many times you need to match. Obviously, you need to match kind of who you're trying to work with, so they feel comfortable as well. But I think, being that there's more to it than, certainly I've realized there's more to it than just grinding away. It's about figuring out which part of your career or profession or what you do and help other people and make a living makes you happy and you're passionate about. And of course I want that for my daughter as well. And I don't want her to have to spend 10 years figuring that out. I'd rather just support her with whatever she wants to do that makes her happy and she's passionate about.
So that excuse me. And that passion, though, which always comes across when you're talking, especially about Flinder and everything you do. But I mean, in terms of that's when we're having a conversation. But when you have that passion in what you started and what you've created and had quite rapid growth in the last 4 years. But how does that passion translate in terms of the impact to your team, the people, as you mentioned before, the people you work with? What impact has that had for you?
So two questions there, I guess. So if I pick up the first one, I think I have no disillusions that nobody will ever be as passionate as I am about what I've created, right? From a vision, from a kind of a seed that I had 5 years ago, and grown it and built it to working with some really, really exciting dynamic businesses that on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, we help them make better decisions and we help them grow faster. And that touches both them as founders, the VCs obviously that work with them, and the people in those businesses as well. So that's if you magnify that down, that's a lot of people's lives that we touch and hopefully improve through being able to give them much better insight on their businesses. So there's that element. but there's no one's ever going to be as passionate as I am, or as Luke and I am, about what we do. But that's not to say people aren't passionate and aren't bought into the philosophy that we have and the energy that we have and the different way of doing things that we're about at Flinder. And I think that's evident, that's really evident when we interview, because we have, a bunch of, we have candidates sat in front of us. They all want to work with us. They all want to come and work with Flinder, pretty much. And a lot, sometimes an interview is a two-way street, right? It's us interviewing, it's a business interviewing a candidate and a candidate interviewing a business. And by the time we've got candidates in front of us, at that point, typically they're fully bought into, of course they ask questions, and of course there are doubts if someone's leaving a bigger firm to come to a smaller firm and all this, that and the other, right? It's only 4 years old, but they're already bought into what we're about, our philosophy, our DNA, our culture, because they've seen all of that on our YouTube presence and seen our team stuff and seen our views on advisory and seen our views on the world of accounting and the other things that we do around the finance function. And so they're already bought into it. So they're already passionate about it before they come in. And that's an advantage that we've had in putting out a lot of content that Luke and I have done to transmit and give that energy and share that energy that we've got so people can absorb it before they come in. So I think that's a long-winded answer of saying, our team are passionate about what we do, and passion can be infectious, but they're not as I have no dissolution. They're not as passionate as me. Like I literally live and breathe the world of finance technology, what we do at Flinder, because it is my baby, right? We created it 4.5 years ago, and we're nurturing it, and we're now just beyond those toddler phases, right? Which are the troublesome twos kind of thing. And we're kind of growing up, or we're trying to mature this business. Yeah. So I don't know if that answers your first question.
Well, no,
I can't even remember what your second one was.
No, my thoughts are, you're saying though, no one will ever be as passionate about your baby, about this business, and how much you are almost obsessive about, as you said, finance and technology. But that must have a direct impact on not only your team, but the people that want to work with you as well, in terms of clients. Would you say?
Yeah, I mean, so don't get me wrong, right? Our team are passionate, more passionate about what we do than I've ever seen anyone in any other business, right? Which is incredible to see, that the way the team are, and the way the team comes together, and the way the team bonds, and how they work together, and the culture and all that. And it's so impressive to see, and that's taken on its own life, if you like. That's no longer Luke and I. We might have started the snowball, but it's the team that keep it. Well, it's got its own momentum, right? And the team are in that snowball, and that's incredible to see. But yeah, I think also, the energy when we talk to prospects and talk to clients, there's probably something that they magnetize, if that's the right word, are attracted to, and probably that adds, one, a huge amount of credibility, and two, it probably draws them to Flinder more so than maybe a inverted commas competitor. Yeah. Because of that passion, because of that energy that we talk about.
So I know, because I mean, everything you do, you kind of throw yourself into, and you operate with a high level of energy. And clearly you're motivated. There's no question about how motivated you are in terms of what you're achieving. But what about those moments when you're lacking motivation? What about those challenging times? What's your way to move through those, or even to help your team when they are struggling with those issues?
I think, you asked me a lot of compound questions, Alex. It's hard for me to stay on top of, I need to be on my A game. Let's take it back to, let's talk about the second one first. So how does the team, so I have a great business partner for a start, right? And Luke, as the COO in the business, is probably the primary, he's he's not the first stop for somebody that would be struggling motivationally. We have a structure in place in the business, right? We have a governance structure in place. We have a structure in place for coaching, for people managing, for mentoring. And so depending on who in the business, where in the business they are, they would have a people manager that they would go to first, right? If it's that people manager that's the problem, then they'd obviously bypass that and go to probably me or Luke. And it's about empathy, it's about listening, I think. And it's a skill I think is it's hard to do. It's hard to do. But one, it's hard to do in a big corporate, right? I was obviously in PwC. It's hard to do there just because well, the kind of bureaucracy and the red tape and the time pressures and that sort of stuff. And it's hard to do in a smaller business because, you know, as I mentioned before, I'm looking at chairs like just before our call. So like, not only am I developing strategy, not only am I talking to prospects and dealing with like, you know, new things that we're doing in the business in terms of our kind of, we're going through a rebrand in terms of marketing, in terms of content, in terms of QAing, quality assuring and reviewing things, all that sort of stuff. And then you go, okay, let's have a conversation. Obviously, people, our team are, and I don't pay lip service to this, our team are the most important asset that we have and the most important thing. We want to be a people organization and people first, and we really try and listen. But like on top of all of that, then you've got to set aside and go, I'm going to have a really deep, meaningful conversation with someone that, you know, really, and pay them the attention and listen as much as possible, or listen, because for them, it's a really, really, really important conversation in their whole month. Right, that 30 minutes, because it's maybe about a challenge in their career or a challenge on a client or a challenge with another person. And actually for that, I could, you know, I don't have 10 of these, right? But which is great because of the structure we have in the business. But say, for example, if I had 10 of those in a week, it would be 10 of them, but to that one person, it could be the most important conversation they have in that week. And I think it's really important to be mindful of that, and you know, phones down, pay full attention, don't look at emails or Slack as it comes through. I think it's really, really important to have those, and mostly, you know, where possible, I try and have face-to-face conversations, because there's a lot around body language that you miss when it's in 2 dimensions. And so actually, you know, yesterday I had a face-to-face interview, and we were talking in the interview for a new candidate, and we were talking in the interview how important face-to-face interviews were. And of course, we've done, you know, God knows how many of those interviews on Zoom over the past 18 months. But face-to-face just creates, there's a whole nother level that you can get from the body language, which you'll totally appreciate in terms of singing, dancing, and I can't remember what the other one is, but like 70% of it, I think, comes from body language, doesn't it, in terms of communication?
Yeah. Well, yeah. So they say 55% body language, 38% is tone of voice, and 7% is the words. Content.
Yeah, exactly. So that's important. I think in terms of, I think the other question was, how do I, when I feel challenged, what do I do? That's a good. I'm more of a, and this probably doesn't come across in anything you will see externally. I'm more of a, not up and down. I'm probably a more excitable person, right? Maybe that's a much more politically correct word to use. I don't want to use I'm not emotional. That's not the right word, right? But I'm much more excitable. So like, I can quite easily be on a high, and if something happens, I'll be like, you know, and then you can beep that out. And you know, quite often my first go-to is Luke. And so, you know, if I have a bad day, he's the balance, and if he has a bad day, I'm the balance. And I think that's another reason, you know, there are many reasons why having a co-founder or 2 co-founders is the right decision to make. And I don't envy anyone that is the sole proprietor of an accounting firm, because they have everything resting on their shoulders, from delivery to people, to winning new business, to brand, to strategy. And you know, that's really tough. And also, when you have a bad day, it's really, really tough, because you're lonely at the top, really, if that's the structure of your business. So you would need some sort of, you know, peer group to be able to level that out. But yeah, Luke's normally, between Luke and I, are normally the 2 that balance each other out like that. So that's how we deal with those. I think also we just go back to like kind of, you know, the core of what we're trying to do, at Flinder, and just kind of reflect on that. I think, I've been in a career in accounting for 20 years, in finance for 20 years. Like, I'm seasoned enough to know that you can have really bad days, but just look at the long game and just reflect on that and take it with a pinch of salt. I think also, life gives you a lot of lessons, and after 20 years, well, I'm not 20, but I mean 20 years in business, after 40 years of life, you're going to deal with really hard challenges and really hard problems in life. And so, the harder those challenges have been, and the lower points you've been in life, it helps put day-to-day challenges in perspective. And if you've dealt with something that's really, really difficult, in like a really difficult life challenge, then actually, most other things aren't that challenging, aren't that difficult. Tomorrow's another day, quite frankly.
It's
and
hard,
that I think is something that's made me extremely resilient in business.
Oh, so the R word, resilience words. Yeah, I was going to say, because sometimes those things can really, especially the last year, I think we've seen a lot of people that have really been smacked down by, like, energy wise, feeling, overwhelmed, burnt out. And so especially if they're working on their own, or and equally isolated from being on Zoom and things like that, and being online and not having those connections, it can really affect energy. How have you managed that in your team in terms of the last 18 months?
I guess I think probably we bided our time. Right? We were so looking forward to get back together. So there was a carrot at the end of there was a small amount of light at the end of the tunnel. Is one thing, because it wasn't going to be forever. Touch wood. Yeah. I think to begin with, we did all the things that you'd expect, right? We did Zoom catch ups, we did Zoom drinks, we did Zoom coffee time, we did Zoom escape rooms, we did Zoom this, Zoom that, right? Sounds like an advert for Zoom. But that's what we tried. That's what everyone else tried, and it's soft, like the culture, like the tight knit. It was difficult to maintain the culture, but more so when new people came in, right? And so I don't know the numbers, how many we hired. We must have hired, I don't know, like 12 people, 15 people during lockdown, something like that.
Yeah.
Excuse me. So last September, when we were allowed out again, we went to the office once a month or once every few weeks, and that only lasted for a couple of months before we got shut down again, of course. But that was great for people to get together in person. So it gave us a little something, but also it was like, oh, nice to meet you in person. Like, we hadn't met so many people in person, and so you can see, like, oh, you're a lot taller than I thought. You're a lot shorter than I thought. Because everyone sat at a chair, like eye level on Zoom.
I get that. So
that was pumping up the chair. That was good, and I think that was, fortunately, we were able to have that touch point. But it was hard. It was hard, especially for the new people, because they hadn't really been, brought into the. Culture has so many different dimensions, and I've heard some people go, oh, if you need to be in person, your culture's not good enough, and great for them. Our culture is a bunch of very, very tight-knit people that have a lot of fun socializing with each other, and that helps them work together in teams and really collaborate. And for us, in-person collaboration is much more effective than remote collaboration. And I think obviously we're back together now. We go skiing every year, as we've had to can that for 2 years in a row. We took the team away a couple of weeks ago for the weekend into Kent, and we did things like Go Ape, which was, we had some people that were a little bit afraid of heights, but everybody loved it. Everybody helped each other around. It was incredible. Then we did, as you can imagine, with Flinder, we did some evening socializing, and it was just great to see. And then actually the following day, we did a kind of, a scavenger hunt and a treasure hunt GPS thing, and get teams against each other around the town. And it was it was just great to like step back and see how after 18 months of everybody being remote and now everybody back together again, like how people were just interacting with each other and how close they were, and how much fun everyone was having. Like, it was a great buzz. It really was. But for us, like that human contact is really important.
So that, I mean, it's a lot that you guys do. And as you say, having had 18 months of being apart, then it sounds like you've jumped straight back into doing as much as you can. And I know you do the ski trip, you do all these events. What's your ROI on that? Did you see a boost in performance and engagement from your team?
So I think the other thing to add before I answer that question is we exited our office 18 months ago, like a lot of people did, right? And we were always a hybrid office. We're always like 3 or 4 days in in London, and one day at home, one day at the client, that sort of thing. We took a 4-person office with some co-working space to see how people wanted to see how the pattern was. And straight away people were like, we need more desks, we want to be in more often, which was great to see, because we had an inclination, but we didn't really know how many desks we'd need straight back. So that's a really great thing to see. So we're going straight back into a full-on office, hence the looking for chairs and desks and stuff. But again, hybrid working. What was the ROI? I think it's very difficult to place, because I think the biggest, there's certainly people working better together, developing better relationships. There's the biggest thing, I think, is the happiness factor, right? And I think, I could be wrong with this, but people generally want to be fulfilled at work, want to be happy at work, and want to work with people they like and respect. And money's probably further down the line there. You can always pay people more money, but it's about introducing those other intangible things that I've just mentioned that I think are really important. So I think the ROI on investing in a team like that is a happy workforce that reduces churn and reduces, and that's quite difficult to measure in a young company to go, because we've always done that sort of stuff, right? So what am I comparing to? Am I comparing to PwC? Well, PwC is which is, I was there 16 years, has a very different model. You have a bunch of graduates that come. There's going to be a lot that fail the exams and are out. Then, when they qualify, they know a third of them are going to go into industry and earn more money. And, there's that natural culling as you go up. So for us to compare ourselves to that is a bit hard. And they've also got a very well established business model, whereas we've got new things coming on all the time, so people can stay and move into something not completely different, but they could go up the ladder in finance, become qualified, and then move into like consulting roles rather than finance roles. But I think to measure the ROIs is quite difficult, and we're obviously a firm that likes to track things, but at the moment we don't feel we need to track the ROI on that. I mean, one, we can just see it on the smiles, right? And that seeing smiles is actually a good indicator that people are happy. And there's no endpoint on where we stop on making people happy. We can always improve everything, right? We've got a culture working group in the business now that we're nearing 40 people. So, and it's out of my hands, out of Luke's hands, in terms of like dictating or directing what that culture is. It's now the team that run, that are responsible for what the culture is like in the business. We still obviously have our core values, but it's, we're outnumbered in terms of people. And there'll be a stage where, look, and I can't go to all the things that happen, all the social things that happen. At the moment we can keep up. But I think smiles and comments and feedback from people is the best indicator of that.
I like that, a smile indicator. So, and as you say, kind of, then I suppose you're seeing that elsewhere, because they're digging in, they're having that passion of their own, and really then actually driving performance that way as well. So it's definitely worthwhile doing, though, is what you're saying.
Yeah, it is, absolutely is. Just connecting the team and seeing them work together in a non-forced environment as well. I've been on these things where you've got to build a raft in a small team and that sort, and compete against someone, and it's slightly forced. I mean, it's great fun, don't get me wrong, it's slightly forced, especially when it's great fun when you see other rafts sinking and you try and pour more water on them. But it's just seen a bunch of people go up on Go Ape and one person being a bit afraid and someone giving them encouragement. It's just great to see that the team are like that, to be honest. So yeah.
Wow, that's pretty awesome though, that you've developed that space and environment for people to do that, to grow, to challenge themselves, because it's not it's certainly not kind of like happy clappy. It's hard work what you guys do, and I've seen your team. They work hard, they deliver, and it fuels that almost.
Yeah, most of our social things seem to be like real activities. Like we do whitewater rafting. We obviously go skiing. There's the Go Ape, and there's a bunch of other stuff. It's all like physical activities. So I think you have to be a bit of an adrenaline junkie to get to work at Flinder.
Well, that's the thing. Maybe is that on your job descriptions there? Adrenaline junkie required.
Should be.
For work and play. I like that. Oh, talking of you were mentioning about metrics, and yeah, you guys like data, and I know you like your dashboards and things like that. So the other thing that I know that you're very good for is you work with young companies, much like yourselves, but who are going for funding, who are going for investment, and of course it's one of your favorite ever things is data. It's your favorite.
It is. I think it is. I think it's completely underplayed in the world of. I think it's completely underplayed in accountants in practice.
Oh, okay.
I think accountants in business tend to be better at this because they're more aligned to the business strategy. Whereas, don't hate me, accountants in practice, I think many of them are more focused on churning out numbers rather than churning out meaning. And the numbers tend to be financial numbers. So I think if you speak to the average accountant and you mention the word data, they'll talk about financial data, which given their background is fair enough. But I think if you take it a step further and go, actually, what do accountants have the propensity to add value to a business? It's really around business-wide intelligence, and what does it mean for the business? What does the financial information mean for the business in the context of other non-financial information, and really bringing that to life, and including either other departments if it's a large business, other functions, or other data sets. And that, I think, is the real opportunity for finance to really support businesses beyond where they have done historically.
I'm going to pick up on something you just said. You just said you've got to bring that data to life. What does that look like?
I think we take for granted I'm not saying we're robots in accounting where we see ones and where everyone else would see a 1 and 0 and we see utopia or whatever, right? Pretty pictures. But we do have the ability to look at numbers and interpret it in our minds and understand what it means. Whereas if we give that to a creative, they don't read it the same. It's like, I can speak Dutch. If I gave a Dutch paragraph to somebody that doesn't speak that language, it would be meaningless to them, right? And so I think, typically the business owner, the founders we work with are extremely intelligent and have a lot of business acumen, so they can get, a good part of the story. But some business owners don't have that ability and would be looking at a Dutch paragraph, and not understanding it. And this is from a context of data and not understanding what that actually means for the business and what actions they need to take from the business. And there's a bit around the data, there's a bit around turning it into information, there's then turning it into insight, and then going, okay, what do I do with that insight? What different action do I take from that to make my business better, reach my goals, whatever those goals might be, and improve the data that comes back, so that you're actually achieving that.
So in terms of you saying, I'm now going to have that in my head, the Dutch paragraph. Yeah. That people, it's so true. So where do you start with finding the story in those numbers?
So I think one, it comes from experience, right? So there's an element here where you need to be experienced in business and what businesses are looking for. And I'm not saying you need 20 years experience, right? You just need some experience and an understanding of the client you're working with or the business, what they care about, what they should care about, what their objectives are, what their strategy is, and aligning to that. So if you've got a business, it's quite difficult to pick up an example, but if you're talking about data points and you're trying to tell a story about some data points and it's like completely irrelevant to the strategy of the business, it might be an interesting story to tell, but is it valuable to the business owner or not, right? So you've got to, actually, we're getting into a whole nother conversation about like delivering value to businesses here, I guess, but which is something that I get my high horse about talking about value and understanding what value actually is to that business, because every business values something differently. But it comes back to understanding what the strategy is, what that business owner cares about, where they're trying to get to, and understanding, what metrics might help them move from A to B. And if you're trying to deliver some metrics and tell a story around what the meaning and underlying depth of those metrics are, so bringing in kind of operational insights as well as financial, just what's happened, it's then about digging further and going, okay, where will these data points be? Do we even have these data points in the business? Do we have them frequently enough? Do we have them clean enough? Is it dirty? Is the data dirty? How easily can I get it? Is it structured the right way? And then figuring out where those data points are in the core systems that they're coming from, and making sure we can get that and then turn that from clean data into insight, into the conversation around insight and telling that story from what's going on. But you can't tell that story with what's going on without understanding operationally what's going on. And that leads you into operational data, not just financial data. So I always talk about financial data tells you what has happened. So revenue might have gone up, it might have gone down. You can see that from financial data, in sales or revenue. You can go, okay, this is what has happened. But if you want to go why it's happened and really tell a story, then you need to dig into that and operationally go, okay, have we sold less this month because of a specific customer? And that gets into operations data. Or if we're selling B2C, have we sold less this month because our average total revenue less this month because our average order value is less? Or have we actually sold less quantity? And if we've sold less quantity, why have we sold less quantity? Is it a particular geography we've sold less to? Or have we not invested enough in the right type of marketing to do that? So it's about digging and unpeeling the layers and going why? And once you have those answers, then you can tell a story of why revenue's gone down, not just what's happened to it. So you can always go, revenue's gone from A to B, why has it happened? And then it's about the real value then is going, what do we need to do differently to get revenue back up? Or if it's the flip the other way around, your revenue's gone from A to B and B is actually higher, you go, okay, what lessons can we learn from that? What else is it masquerading? So our revenue might have gone way up in one area and might have gone down in another. So segmenting that data and going, actually, we need to learn from this geography and apply it to a different geography, those types of things. So it's always about peeling back the layers on operational data to add the flavor to the story. And then add some challenge.
Add some challenge. You say add some challenge.
Yeah, add some challenge to the business. I think also, one of the things that we empower our team with, our portfolio CFOs and business advisors, is to challenge our clients as well. It's not just to sit there and be a yes man, it's to ask hard questions. And I think quite often, I'm generalizing here, this isn't the case across. And I think industry tends to do this a lot better than practice. I think because of that paid relationship, that in practice we generally don't challenge as much as in industry, I think, around what could be done better and challenging decisions, because we're in a subservient relationship. I'm sweeping generalization there. There are some very, very good accountants in practice that will give challenge, and but that's my feeling, is that we don't challenge enough, whereas in industry they probably challenge more because they're they're so aligned to the business, so aligned to the strategy, understand the business a lot more, and have a different type of dynamic and relationship. Whereas obviously they're paid by the business, but in a third party paid relationship, it is a different dynamic.
It is a different dynamic. I mean, almost what you're describing there is that by that challenging, asking those hard questions, it's almost like you're coaching them. You're coaching them to be better. You're reflecting back at them the story you see in the numbers as an objective point of view, and throwing it back at them and saying, okay, what are you going to do now?
And sometimes it can be rhetorical questions as well. It's not, oh, it's like, what would happen if we did this? What would happen if we did this? So I think it's just about bringing, I always say to our guys and gals, so it's a generic term for me, our team in the senior roles, think of it as your business. Like, if it was your business, what would you be thinking? And I think if you really do put yourself in your client's shoes, and it's such a tacky phrase to use, but I think if you do that, you start to, your mind, you have this mindset. Oh, almost got that wrong. Mindset shift to more ownership of decision making, and you think a little bit differently, and you're not necessarily in that third party vendor relationship where you're kind of giving something but sitting back. I think if you think of it as your business, you add more value, you add more challenge. And also I think it helps you go, what would I want to know if this was my business? What would I want to know? And am I giving enough of a story around the data and the metrics? If I was the business owner and if I was the one making decisions, would I really have enough information from what I've prepared to make those decisions, or do I need to do something else? So I think that's quite a good way to reflect on the story that's being told and the story that's being, aggregated from the data to share back.
There's some real critical and creative thought processes going on behind there, which is not sometimes what finance departments think prioritize in terms of skills. But do you prioritize that then in terms of actually, let's think beyond,
I think so yes, right. When we talk about what we do, we talk about smart finance function, right? And smart finance functions around integration of technology. It's around optimized operational finance processes. It's about data analytics, giving you the insight there, and it's about this board support, this portfolio CFO, this business advisor challenge. And so for me, that's what we call a smart finance function, and that's that's different basically to what has gone on for the last 200 years in finance. I think so. For us, there's absolutely an element that we need to coach and nurture and train our associates and senior associates on the basics, the foundations. They absolutely need to know that, right? And we really go to town on that because we've got an internal syllabus as well. We don't just rely on external courses like ACCA or AAT. We then supplement that with, here's our internal syllabus based on what we think you need to know to run a smart finance function as well. And then as you go through those steps, you obviously need those basics, but then it moves and morphs more into the different type of skill set that you need. And we want to shift as much of the preparation in a finance function to technology as much as possible. So we've got more time for interpretation, which is where the value is. There's no value in preparing. There's no value in processes prepared. There of course there is, but if you get that as right and slick as possible, that it should just be mechanical. And so the real value that a business sees, because a business just expects all the basics to be done, right? Yeah. And so whether it takes us 2 hours or 20 hours, the business doesn't really care. They just want that done and expect it done, because we run finance functions, we're an accounting firm. What they really want, and that is a core expectation from any business, to just get the numbers right. But the value added part is the part on top where you break down the story, what it's actually telling you, and challenge the business to think differently or take different actions, or bringing that insight. And if we can shift as much of that, as much of the time that we have in our team, and as much of the what a client pays us, as much of that, availability into the interpretation, then that is what we want to do, because the other stuff is just like taken as a it's just taken as a given, quite frankly.
It's the standard, but it's the value that you do. It's that passion, it's that connection to your people, and really, and as you say, challenge to think differently, which I actually wrote down because I thought it was a great quote, that actually makes you stand out. That's what makes you guys different. You're, as you say, you're smart with it. You're not just doing the basic, you're doing that added extra that's actually going to take your clients and your people so much further than they even thought they were going to get.
Yeah, I mean, that was the DNA, that was the philosophy, that was the DNA, that was the original vision, thesis of Flinder before we set up. It was kind of like, we see a gap here, we see companies wanting a certain type of company wanting it. Not everyone does, or maybe everyone does, but not everyone values it the same way, and therefore will pay for it. And we saw a certain subsection of businesses and sectors that absolutely will, and that was the original thesis for Flinder in terms of what we will deliver. And it's all about condensing the preparation as much as possible to spend as much time on interpretation and value adding activities, which really is the goal of any finance function. And that's my history in PwC consulting, to be honest. And that's where we're, from large multinationals, we're streamlining it down and using technology to give smaller businesses access to that.
But you know what, you've just looped right back round to where we started in this conversation, which is the fact that it's your passion that's directed, yours and Luke's passion for what you wanted to do, what you kind of left going, do you know what, actually, I want to do something different, and I want to be obsessed by what I do. And as you said, live and breathe it. And clearly that's directed, as you say, the DNA, everything, it's leaked into everything within the business and how you operate and what you do. Well, this has been a fantastic chat and insight into what your story is, how you operate as a leader. We can tell so much more about you. So thank you so much for coming and chatting to us. If you're going to have
always a pleasure
piece of advice for a finance manager or finance director out there who was looking to embolden their team or really have an impact themselves as a leader, and they're feeling a bit stuck or under challenge, what do you think is one step towards making an impact in their career that they could do?
That's a really difficult question that you put me on the spot there for. I think so there was a book that was given to me at PwC, which was just before I left PwC, and I don't know if it was the final straw that kind of broke the camel's back, the push the final catalyst there. It was StrengthsFinder 2.0, I think it was.
Oh, I've got that.
by Gallup, I think. And I think we're all about benchmarking and baselining at Flinder in terms of finance function. I think as a person that's ambitious, I think doing a reflection somehow on where you are, what your strengths are, where your passions are, is quite a good exercise to do, and it can tell you quite a lot, whether it's StrengthsFinder or something else. I think critically assessing where you are today, where you want to get to, will almost give you a roadmap for what you need to, where the gaps are, and what you need to focus on. So I think that would probably be my on-the-spot answer to your question.
I like it. It's a good one. Yes. Years ago, I think that was one of the first ones I ever did, was StrengthsFinder 2.0. And it does give you that. It's a bit, I use DISC a lot. So, and it does give you a baseline. So it's a fantastic recommendation. So definitely go if you haven't done any of those things. Some people look at personality assessments as a real reflection of who you are as a person, but actually, if you look at it as what it's a reflection of what you're doing right then and there and how you've answered those questions. And that can tell you a lot about what's going on in your head at that moment. So it can be very,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. The other thing that I would say, if I can get another bonus one in, is go to events in the finance world. So things like the Digital Accounting Show, Accounting Web Live, Accountex, and lap up as much as you can that's not in your day-to-day job. Like, you're typically spend the majority of your time, 8, 9, 10 hours working in your little box of, and I mean kind of like psychological box of, or mental box of what your day job is. And it will keep you in there unless you see what else is out there. And there's some people talking about great things, firms doing great things. There's the world of finance and accounting has moved and accelerated on so fast in the last 5 to 10 years. And not just technology, but also about the way people collaborate, the way people work, the human side of it. Excuse me. I think if you open your mind to what's going on and connect with a bunch of people, read a bunch of white papers, go to these events, it will really open your mind as to, wow, there's more than just the way I've been taught to do it, like 10 years ago, 5 years ago, whatever. And I think that is another one that I am a continual learner. Right? I listen to podcast after podcast after podcast. Even in the car on the way here this morning, I was listening to podcast. I'll do it all day, every day when I'm walking, when I've got downtime in inverted commas. And the same with webinars. I'll put them on 1.5 times speed after they've happened and lap them up. And I think continually learning and listening to other people in the sector and profession, I think is a really valuable thing to do, because it can take you outside the box. It'll help you think differently. It'll help you come up with new things that are much more exciting, much more innovative ways than you may have been taught to do it. And it'll also spark off some ideas that you'll have on your own that you can push forward in the profession as well.
That is fantastic. Do you know what I'd say the word for that is, and the reflection of you is definitely growth mindset. Definitely mindset in terms of that. Fantastic. Thank you so much. Love that.